Everybody's all set? All right. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. First, I'd like to extend my sympathies of every member of the New York City Police Department to the family, friends, and colleagues of Robert Martinez. He's one of our steam fitters who was tragically killed on the Gowanus Expressway yesterday morning. Robert was assigned to our plant management unit in Police Plaza, and he was one of the many extraordinary people that keep this building running, and they actually keep our entire police department running. Robert was a Staten Island resident who had 18 years with the NYPD. He'll be sorely missed by all who knew him and had the privilege of working with him. And second, I want to thank the New York media for the coverage you've afforded the many acts of bravery, kindness, and stoic professionalism our cops have been involved in lately. On Monday night, when a distraught woman ran to the 115 precinct in Queens clutching her baby girl who wasn't breathing, she met 22-year-old rookie officer Osvaldo Nunez. And quickly, with the composure of a veteran cop, Officer Nunez performed CPR and literally brought the beautiful little girl back to life. Incidentally, Officer Nunez is one of the 725 cops who just graduated from the Police Academy on July 2nd. So they're out there, along with the almost 300 summer all-out officers currently placed in commands around the city right now. So we're looking forward to even more positive stories in August and September. And let me mention this coming Tuesday, August 7th, is National Night Out Against Crime, and I hope all New Yorkers, the whole family, will come out and join us at the many events going on in all 5 boroughs. It's a great time every year. It's a great way to meet your local cops, to help build that trust and to strengthen positive relations. And look, we don't turn away from criticism because we know it goes hand in hand with the possibility of making the safest big city in America even safer, but we know that the public we serve, they truly need us. And we need them too. All 8.6 million New Yorkers, plus the millions more people who commute in for work or visit each and every day. Just this morning, just before 6 a.m., witnesses told police they saw a woman jump off the Williamsburg Bridge in the East River. Thanks in no small part to that quick reporting, coupled with our remarkable coordination between our patrol, emergency service, harbor, aviation, and scuba units, we located and pulled the woman to safety, conscious and alert. We also found and removed from the river her friend who jumped in to try to save her. While we obviously don't want everybody just putting themselves in harm's way like that, sharing the responsibility for public safety does mean alerting the police to anything dangerous or suspicious and giving us a chance to investigate. And that goes for everything from terrorism to so-called traditional crime like gang-involved drug or gun trafficking. You see it every day. All the guns NYPD cops are taken off our streets. Overall crime and arrests are down, but the number of firearms we seize continues to go up. It's that precise focus on the real drivers of crime that enable us to keep reducing the shootings and murders. I'm confident in New Yorkers' ability to push forward. That's one of the reasons for the major changes we're undergoing in the NYPD. The bottom line is, all New Yorkers want all of our neighborhoods to be safer places for our children, for our elderly, and for ourselves. So I'm asking the public we serve to keep supporting your police, keep working with us, commit to watching the backs of those you call when you're scared, those you call when you're in trouble. Everyone must participate, and that's how we're safely making our way forward together. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Really appreciate that message that all New Yorkers are part of helping us to stay safe, supporting our police officers, working with them, communicating with them. It's a huge piece of the equation. So really want to encourage all New Yorkers to help us build on this progress. Want to give my appreciation to the Commissioner, to First Deputy Commissioner Tucker, to Chief of Department Monahan, the whole leadership team at NYPD, and all the men and women of the NYPD for another very strong month in the month of July 2018. I also want to share my condolences and the condolences of the people of this entire city on behalf of the people of the city for the family of Robert Martinez. Our hearts go out to you, and we will keep the family in our prayers. And I appreciate everything the Commissioner said about how he served this city and this department. And on a happier note, the extraordinary story of Officer Nunez, literally just weeks out of the academy, saving a life. And it's a beautiful New York story. And I really commend him for the heads-up thinking and the fast effort to save a life. It's absolutely everything that gives people faith in this great department. We've got some important developments to talk about for July. And the bottom line here is this department continues to innovate, looks for new ways to make us safe. I have never been in a meeting where anyone said, well, we're the safest big city in America, let's just fold right there and just keep doing what we're doing. No, the concept has always been, let's go farther, let's do new things, let's do better things. We all were honest in May and June that we saw some things we didn't like so much and some things that we wanted to address differently. PD did that and targeted some key trouble spots, put a number of officers out versus some are all out to focus on those areas. You see some changes in July, some improvements in July because of decisions made in May and June and adjustments made, and that's been the norm with the NYPD. Also, I think a very smart, important development this week in changing the approach to addressing people who are stopped for fare evasion and have outstanding warrants and addressing those immediately. So addressing the past warrants, addressing the immediate offense that just occurred, and freeing up a lot of officer time to go back on patrol and keep us all safe. Another great example of innovation. The month of July, very pleased to say, July 2018, the safest July on record. So NYPD has achieved something really important in July compared to July of 2017. Murders down almost 37%. Tied the all-time low for murders in the month of July compared to July 2013. That was the other time when we got this low. But overall crime, the safest July ever. And now, because of the great success in July, the year has shown really great improvement. So now, year to date through the end of July, total crime down 1.7% compared to last year. And again, last year was a record-setting year. And murders are now down 1.7% overall through July compared to last year. We're on a pace right now to do what we did last year, to have the safest year in New York City history for the people of the city since the Cold War. And I keep trying to put it in perspective for everyone, how different, how far back you have to go to find times that equate to this in terms of keeping crime down. NYPD, and you'll hear it certainly in Chief Pollack's detailed explanation of July, NYPD is living by the concept that records are made to be broken, and they're on pace to do it again. A quick few words in Spanish. Nuestra ciudad acaba de tener el mes de julio más seguro en su historia y está en camino a tener otro año histórico. Sin embargo, este récord no es suficiente para los hombres y mujeres de la policía. Por eso, no tengo dudas de que vamos a seguir mejorando la seguridad en la ciudad grande más segura del país. With that, my pleasure to turn to our Chief of Crime Control Strategies, Lori Polk.
Just turn it off? Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the first 7 months of this year, we are on pace to finish the year potentially under 100,000 index crimes, and this would be only the second time that has occurred. Through the end of July year to date, we have recorded 53,937 index crimes. Just to give you a little perspective, in '94, in July, we had 33,782. We finished last year with a little over 96,000, and we have currently recorded 911 fewer crimes than last year. These 911 fewer crimes represent a 1.7 decrease year to date. And again, to be within reach of the 100,000 number for the second time in the CompStat error is absolutely remarkable. As for the month of July, we recorded 8,500 index crimes, or 157 less than last year's record low of 8,657 for the month, and that's a 2% decrease. We've achieved these reductions in places like Patrol Borough Queens South, where the hardworking men and women are commanded by Chief Dave Barrere and Investigative Chief Joe Kenny, where they impressively drove down crime 12% in July, including a significant 24% reduction in robberies. This is done, through timely pattern identification and aggressive apprehension efforts. The hardworking police officers and detectives of the Bronx, led by Chief Larry Nakunin, reduced overall crime by 6.5% this July and brought murders down in July by 64%. over last July. That's 5 murders versus 14, a reduction of 9 murder victims. The reduction was accomplished through thorough analysis and proper deployment of resources. Police officers are continuously shifted as conditions change, and detectives relentlessly are following up on every case and every lead. As Chief Monahan announced to you last month, overall crime for the first 6 months of the year was at a record low. This downward trend continues, especially as it relates to murders. This month, we tied the record for the lowest number of murders for any July. The lowest number of 24 murders was also recorded in July 2013, and we're always cognizant that even one murder is too many. The 24 murders this July is a 37% reduction compared to the 38 murders in July of 2017. This brings our year-to-date murder number down by 3, 171 versus 174. Gunshot wounds account for nearly 70% of the method of death, with nearly half, or 43% of the murders occurring with some type of gang nexus. We began observing a concentration of murders in northern Brooklyn, which had 6 or 25% of July's total, and focused our deployment and other responses there. Four of those 6 victims were 16 years old or younger and were shot and killed by members of this same age group as a result of gang activity. This age range, 17 and under, shows increases of both victims, that's 12 versus 3, and known perpetrators, 200% up, 12 versus 4 for murders year to date. Again, this highlights the need for community involvement when youth begin to go down the wrong path. Resources to help at-risk youth can be found at your local precincts and police service areas, and we encourage participation in Build-A-Block meetings where you can meet your neighborhood coordination and steady sector officers whose job it is to keep people safe and provide the community members with resources and collectively solve crime problems. You can reach or find out who your NCO is by calling or stopping into your local precinct or simply typing in NCO or Build-A-Block into your nyc.gov website. Domestic-related murders for July are down 29%, 5 versus 7. This includes a tragedy that occurred in Astoria on Monday. We have seen a positive downturn, but domestic violence is an iceberg that friends, family, and coworkers often don't see until it's too late. So again, if you know of a significant other, son, daughter, coworker, or friend who is being abused or you suspect is in a volatile relationship, call 911 in an emergency situation or the domestic violence police officers in your local precinct. Also, the Safe Horizon CVAP program, Crime Victims Advocacy Program, will be in every precinct by the end of the year. We consistently see that 3/4 of our domestic violence homicide victims had never had police contact prior to their death. Looking at shootings, we'll give you some context. Historically, the summer months have the highest number of shooting incidents. July monthly averages over the last 5 years is 104. So in 2014, in July, we saw 134 shootings. In 2015, 117 shootings. This July, we are up 11 incidents, 90 versus 79. Still unbelievably low compared to last July, which was the lowest number ever recorded for shootings in July. That makes this July the second lowest. We are currently at a record low in year-to-date shootings with 428 incidents compared to 439 last year. Taking a look back to previous years, I think I have a PowerPoint up there, we can gain perspective on just how we've reduced shooting violence and how much safer we are. But like murders for the month, shootings have also increased in parts of Brooklyn. The borough as a whole experienced an increase this July, 43 versus 25. If we move on to rape, we showed an increase of 10 reported rapes, or 7.5, for July, which was 143 versus 133. The trend we had seen earlier this year of victims coming forward to report incidents which occurred in previous years has waned. In July, 12.5, or 18 of the reported rapes occurred outside this year, compared to the 20 to 30% we were seeing earlier in the months of 2018. Robbery has reached a new low for July with 1,065 against 1,243 last year. Felony assaults are down 7.3%, or 141 crimes. I'm also happy to report that burglary has reached a benchmark low of 1,037 compared to 1,044 last year. We saw a slight uptick in grand larceny for the month of July, 3,837 versus 3,739, which is a 2.6 increase. Grand larceny auto has also experienced an increase in the month of July. They're up 14.3%, or 75, which is mostly motorcycles, but every crime briefing, my third so far, we have stressed the importance of not leaving the keys in the car, leaving the cars running, That accounts for a very big segment of the year-to-date and a quarter of the grand larceny autos for the month. Index crime in housing for July is down 11.7%, 409 versus 463, a total of 54 crimes. Index crime in transit for July is up slightly, 25 crimes, 198 versus 173, which is predominantly seen in Manhattan, driven by pickpockets and perpetrators that are targeting inattentive or sleeping passengers. I would like to echo the sentiments about going to your National Night Out Against Crime, and I'll thank you very much.
All right, do you have any on-topic questions about crime? Dean?
Hey, can you go back and just, you were saying about the gang-related murders, kids 17 and under, can you go back to that and explain what the numbers are, and if that is really now something you have to look at, that the victims are becoming younger and younger, as well as the assailants?
I don't know that it's any different than it has been in the past. It's just we have seen this month, we have seen a rise in it, and then we looked at the entire year. It has been an uptick, like I said. We do have pockets of gang violence. Right now it's occurring in Brooklyn.
Tony?
The last time we had this conference, there was a complaint by somebody from the city council about the Bronx being apparently victimized, communities of color with crime. Could you spell out what the situation now is in the Bronx in terms of serious crimes? Shootings going down, have murders going down, have they stay the same? Historically, how is that trending?
Murders year to date are still up in the Bronx, but we had a spike in April, May, and June. We have really turned that around. As I said, it was 5 versus 12 for the, let me give you the right numbers. I can give you the exact number. I did say it, but like I said, in July it has significantly decreased. So I don't see it as being some sort of trend that's continuing.
The shootings, the situation in the Bronx.
The shootings in the Bronx. So they're also down 15 shootings for the month, 18 versus 33. So Chief Nakunin and the hardworking men up there and women are doing a very good job.
Yeah, in the back row.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned something about how officers changed the way they were doing things at the very beginning. What are those ways, the processes that they've been going through that have changed recently?
I'll let the commissioner and his team speak to it. The central point I'm making is there is an ongoing focus on innovation, and one of the examples is the notion of figuring out ways to maximize officer time on patrol to help protect everyone and to address an issue like fare evasion at the point of contact, including the possibility of addressing previous outstanding warrants simultaneously. So Commissioner's team can speak to that.
Yeah, Chief Coogan, he's the XO of the Transit Bureau, will speak about that. Vinny?
Okay, evading the fare is still illegal, but we had a pilot project, that we had in effect since February 1st. As of August 1st, yesterday, its new policy is in writing. There's very few minor changes since the other thing. But if you are stopped for evading the fare, you will be issued a tab summons. The majority of the people, some people who might not fit that criteria will be given a C summons. Then a small amount of people will be arrested. This is keeping more officers in the trains, on patrol, out in the stations, interacting with the public. And last week, we increased our districts in neighborhood policing from 2 to 6. We expect the remainder of the 12 districts to have neighborhood policing by the beginning of this new year. And we want these officers out there, these neighborhood police officers out there in the trains, interacting with the public. So this will keep more of them out.
And just one, if I may add, Chief, could you just explain the time reality of how addressing the outstanding warrant right away and all that is more time efficient than what you used to have to do arrest
yes.
by arrest?
I mean, before, if you would arrest a person, obviously it would take many hours doing fingerprinting and arresting the person, putting them through. Right now, if you have a SAP warrant, so if you got caught, say, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, drinking a beer in the street, now you're going to be issued a criminal court summons. The officer's going to bring the person back. He's going to take care of that minor warrant and also take care of the criminal court summons at the same time and be back on patrol within a few hours.
I have a related question. It's kind of two parts. The City Council back in December passed a bill that requires the police department to produce quarterly reports on fare evasion with demographic data, station data about where this is happening. So the first part is...
So I'm going to just cut you off there for a second. Can we save that for off topic? All right. I don't know, that's a long question, so make sure you get it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right.
So on the
Crime?
statistics.
Yeah. Any other crime questions in the back?
Can you give an update on crime stats on gangs in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, and citywide?
Specific numbers as to homicide, shootings?
40% gang-related. Yeah, 40% for both murders and shootings.
Tony?
There's been you said that the rate complaints have abated from the beginning of the year, although they're probably still up historically. Any ideas to what's causing that, or is that just by chance or aberration?
So the question is whether or not they're slowing down, or so we definitely had a big campaign to get, and we still encourage people to come forward and report ones that are happening presently and ones that have happened in the past. We want to know when those crimes are happening now, obviously, and we want to know who the offenders were before. Right now, the rape complaints that are coming in from out of this year, from prior years, 2017 and back, have slowed down. We're not seeing such an increase in those reports. We're still seeing an increase year to date, but we're not seeing an increase in the out-of-period reporting.
Any other crime questions? All right, I'm a man of my word. Right there.
So, yeah, going back.
No, I'm going to have to cut you off again.
Wow.
That's twice. I don't even know you. I'm sorry. Chief, we had an off-duty sergeant involved in an officer-involved shooting this morning, and Chief Monahan's going to speak about that. And then right after that, you're up, okay? All right.
All right. This is still under investigation. We still have a lot of work to do. But at approximately 4:56 a.m. this morning, an off-duty sergeant was walking westbound on Livonia Avenue, heading towards Pennsylvania Avenue. He was confronted by a male, and during his confrontation, he fired 2 shots at him, striking him once in the face. The male is currently in stable condition. Again, like I said, this whole investigation is still ongoing by the Firearms Investigation Division in the Kings County District Attorney's Office. We are still conducting numerous interviews with people that were involved, and we are reviewing videos that are out there. The sergeant has been placed on modified duty and placed on administrative duty, pending the outcome of some of our initial findings.
Questions about the shooting? Tina?
What did the gunman or the guy who was shot say to the officer?
That's still all part of the investigation. We still have to find out. We're still conducting interviews with everyone. He's in the hospital, the male that was shot, and the sergeant is currently back in the precinct.
Yep, right here.
Was it a robbery attempt, or was it just...
We're looking at that now. We think there may have been some sort of dispute prior to this incident.
They knew each other?
I don't know if they knew each other or there was just dispute prior. Still part of the investigation. We have a long way to go on this one.
Hold on. Yep, right there.
The man who was shot, was he armed, or did he have a weapon of any sort?
Still all part of the investigation at this point.
Yep, in the back row.
Do we know if the sergeant helped give medical attention to the man that was shot? I'm not saying that he had to, but did he?
We are still looking at that. We're reviewing all the video. At this point, I don't have that answer. I know we did call 911.
So at this point, can you say whether it appears to be a justified shooting, or can you go there?
We're not going to make any determination at this point until we can actually interview everyone that's involved. So this is going to be an ongoing case with the Kings County DA.
And just to clarify, there was no firearm found at the scene? No firearm recovered?
Is it normal for the sergeant to have gone on modified duty after an incident like this? Is that a normal process for something that happens like this?
There are certain things that we saw in this investigation that we have questions that are unanswered at this point. Until we answered that, we felt it was best to place them on modified duty.
Any other questions about the off-duty shooting? All right, there you go. Hold on. I don't know you first. What's your first name?
Vincent.
Vincent? Okay, Vincent goes first.
So, yeah, the City Council passed this bill that requires quarterly reports on subway fare evasion enforcement. And the NYPD has refused to comply with this law. I wanted to get, citing public safety concerns, I want to see if you could elaborate, first part of the question, if you could elaborate on what those public safety concerns are. And the second part of the question is for Ms. Mayor. Why would you sign a bill into law that you knew your department?
Let me start. This is going to be resolved, and this will be addressed, is the bottom line. There are some obvious, I'll speak as the non-policing expert, but speak in the language of everyday New Yorkers. There are legitimate concerns in terms of not portraying information that interferes with the work of the NYPD. That's always a consideration. But we can address those concerns while achieving transparency and conforming to the law. So this will be resolved.
Yeah, and Chief Donnie will speak about it, but with your characterization as a refusal, I'm not sure if I agree with that. We are working with City Council to get this right, and we do have to balance safety and transparency. Jack?
Yeah, we have actually been in conversation with the council members, the sponsors of that legislation, and the questions of transparency and having visibility into the activities of our officers with respect to theft of service arrests. We are working very diligently to have that resolved very quickly. We expect that to happen very soon.
Shouldn't that have happened before the bill became a law? That's typically how this process works, right?
I'll speak as the person involved in that process on a regular basis and also as a former council member. No, I don't think that's a fair characterization. I think there are times when a fair amount of detail is worked out in the legislative process, but you still have to figure out how you're going to implement something. And then there are other times where the intent is agreed on, but not the mechanics. And I think this point that you have to think about protecting the ability of NYPD to do its job is obviously valid. But we want transparency, and we'll achieve it. And I think that's something you'll see in a matter of the next few weeks.
The first row.
Yeah, I was hoping you could go over the process for the fare evasion again, what's going to happen if somebody's caught. And then I was wondering how much the demographics, I know you haven't released that information yet, but how much that played into the decision here, as well as maximizing time for officers.
Okay, Vinny, you want to answer the first part of that?
Okay, if you're stopped for evading the fare, like I said, most people will get a tab summons. It's a civil summons, returnable to transit adjudication court. In certain circumstances, you can get a C summons. And then there are other circumstances, if you don't fit all the criteria, you will still be arrested.
What are those?
Okay, you will be arrested if you have a warrant, a felony or misdemeanor warrant other than a SAP warrant, you will be arrested. If you evaded the fare and you're a transit offender, you fit under that category, you'll be arrested. If there's a legitimate law enforcement purpose, you may be arrested. And if you cannot be properly identified. Now, we try all we can to properly identify people. If everything fails, then you will be arrested.
So as to the second part of your question, we are always looking to improve the way we deploy our resources, specifically the Transit Bureau officers. We're always looking for efficiencies. We look at outcomes, too. We look at the number of people that were arrested and what were the outcomes. There's a fine paid. Was it DP'd? Was it not prosecuted? So we are in constant talks with all of our prosecutor partners to make sure that we make this as efficient as possible and not necessarily looking at the disparities. Jonathan?
Commissioner, we took a look at gun prosecutions in this city, and it shows that there's a disparity borough by borough. The Manhattan DA's office, for example, 61% of all people arrested with a loaded gun get prosecuted on the top count, face 3.5 years in prison. In Brooklyn, that number is just 25%. In Queens, 36%. In the Bronx, 34%. What is your thought about these disparities and how gun prosecutions are being handled?
Yeah, so this is without a doubt, our bread and butter. This is how we reduce violence, by targeting people that carry guns and use guns. So each and every week, we work with all of our prosecutorial partners, the local DAs, the U.S. attorney's officers, and we go down case by case to make sure that those prosecutions are as effective as possible and that there are consequences if you carry a gun in New York City. While there are disparities, we continue to work with all the DA's officers and the U.S. attorneys to make sure that if you're carrying a gun in New York City, there are severe consequences.
These numbers?
I'm never sad. I'd like it to be 100%, but so I'm never satisfied with the numbers. I want them to continue to go up. And we're working with Eric's office. We're working with Darcel's office. We're working with Cy's office to make sure that we improve upon those numbers each and every day.
So when you say 100%, and you hear a number that the Brooklyn DA's office is only 25%?
You putting words in my mouth here? What are you doing? I know that trick, Jonathan. Yeah, okay.
Thoughts on
All of us have to do better. And, you know, we have a great deal of respect for the DAs, but we would like to see more prosecutions, there's no question. And there has to be a culture of consequence. There has to be a realization that anyone who thinks that they can get away with having an illegal gun in New York City, that that's not going to work and that they'll do a lot of time. And so this is something we've all been working on, had a lot of conversations with the folks up here over the last few years on how we can improve that. And we've also had those conversations with the DAs, including talking to them about how we can help them, what they need to be able to do that more effectively.
So, Jonathan, I do owe you a real answer. In Brooklyn North, we had, Lori spoke about the number of, the increase in shootings we've had in the month of July. So we really need Eric's office to make sure that we're in lockstep with them about moving forward with the prosecutions of these cases. So the number, what'd you say, 31% in Brooklyn? 25%? Yeah, it needs to be much higher than that. And some of that's Eric's office, and some of it's the work we do, quite frankly. We have to make sure we do our jobs correctly, so we present them with good cases. Yep.
Just one more follow-up on that, those enforcement reports. So are you saying there's not a clear date when you're going to start publishing them? You're still working that out? And would you commit to publishing the previous quarter reports retroactively once you reach an agreement with the council?
Jack, you want to talk about that? Joe, you're up next.
Yeah, so within the next couple of weeks, we will have this resolved, and we are going to retroactively produce the reports back to the last quarter of 2017. Okay?
Joe?
Question for Chief Shea. I'm hoping that you describe for me different changes that was made to have Mr. Ivory's IDs in terms of photo arrays and lineups. How are those administered differently today?
Yeah, little trouble at the end hearing you. How is it administered today differently?
Differently today than they used to.
Yeah. So when you look at building a case, a prosecutable case, at its fundamental core is the issue of the identification procedures. Certainly today, we have the luxury of dealing with, I would argue, more evidence than we have at any point in time when you look at the electronics, when you look at the video that's available today, the forensic evidence. But ID procedures are at its core still a significant part of the case. Like anything else, we constantly assess how we police New York City, how our detectives investigate New York City cases, how we do on those cases. I'm confident that today, as we sit here in 2018, we've worked very hard over the last couple of years, working with our partners on the prosecution side. It's not just on gun cases, Jonathan. It's on how we bring evidence to prosecutions to bear. Not just with prosecutors, we also listen to and work with advocates. How do we make changes? Just because we follow an accepted practice today, a constitutional practice, does not mean that we're content to not look for other ways in an era of transparency to be fairer. So specifically to changes in the last couple of years, two significant changes when you look at how we administer photo arrays. The blinded procedure has been put in place. And that's not a decision that's put in place solely by the NYPD again. It's after long consultations with the entire community, really, of prosecutions, on the defense side, on the prosecution side. When you look at how we collect statements today in the NYPD, very different just in the last couple years. Taking a statement, is it a written statement? Today in the NYPD world, it's more often than not a videotape statement that then is made available to prosecutors and defense. So I guess I would just sum it up that we're confident where we are today in how we build cases, but that's not to say that we're resting on our laurels, and we're always looking outside New York City, best practices nationwide.
Not involved in the investigation? Who shows the photo?
So that it's probably a long, for this conversation, you have blinded photo arrays, double-blinded photo arrays. This is a case where a photo array, generally speaking, 6 photos, one being the suspect, shown to a defendant, the witness or the complainant picked out, and the person showing that array does not know what place the defendant is. That would alleviate any beliefs, whether appropriate or not, that the person is steering the person to pick one. You cannot do that if you don't know which one it is. And that's a process put in place, built on nationwide best practices.
Hold on, Tony. Anybody else? Graham?
Police made an arrest in the murder of Ebony Young in the 81st Precinct. A woman in Texas was arrested. Do you guys have any more details?
Just very brief. I don't have that in front of me, but that's a case earlier this year. It's a case out of Brooklyn where a woman was stabbed to death. Woman right in the general vicinity of a bodega in Brooklyn. There were several people involved in that death. We recently located one of the individuals responsible for that stabbing homicide, a female, in Texas, and brought back to Brooklyn to face charges. And we can give you the details. DCPI can follow up.
Tony?
Commissioner, on the question of 3D gun printing, instruction printing that's currently now, I guess, restrained by a restraining order out by a federal judge, what was your feeling when you saw this potentially creating more firearms?
So I had the same feeling I got when I saw the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act. We don't need more guns in New York City, and we definitely don't need guns that are not traceable, because that 3D printer guns are basically a zip gun. It's one round that's fired, and there's no rifling. So there's no way to trace where that gun comes from. And if you carry one in New York City, you're committing a felony. So I have very strong feelings about that. We don't need any more firearms in New York City. We definitely don't need any firearms that are untraceable. Yeah.
So I know part of the turnstile, the fare evasion arrests is, I guess, people with outstanding summonses will be given rides to court. Will that be extended to, like, for example, with the new marijuana policy? Will people arrested or at least given summonses for marijuana possession in public?
I don't know if I'd classify it as rides to court. I think if you were arrested for theft of service or given a summons for theft of service and you were placed in a police car and brought down to court, I don't know if you'd consider that a ride. So it's a pretty serious sanction. Yeah, it's a serious sanction.
Wait, I gotta jump in. I think it is a ride in the sense that you get into a car and you go somewhere. I don't think you feel the same way. Right. It's not like getting into a taxi. I think there's a very preventative impact if you are stopped by an officer because you're doing something illegal, and the message is you need to come over with us to court to address these outstanding issues. I think that probably sticks in someone's mind.
And the ride is in handcuffs, so.
Police, particularly with the new marijuana policy, of giving summonses as opposed to.
Yeah, if we're going to give somebody a summons and they have an outstanding summons adjudication part, and that's a criminal court summons, it's not a misdemeanor or a felony warrant, the same process will take place. In the back, hold on. Yep.
Update on the Drayton case, the bi-coastal.
Yeah, regarding the case, that there isn't much new to report. There was a couple articles in the paper yesterday, but I will say what I've said before. We are very interested in the history of Mr. Drayton. We have resources devoted to really following up on his past. What can we learn? What other victims may there be? We've made some outreach, whether it's through Twitter, whether it's through proactive reporting with some of the people in this room. And we encourage anyone to come forward that may have any information, whether you're a victim or whether you just may know something about Mr. Drayton or any of the previous encounters. We have not received to date any Crime Stoppers tips regarding new victims or to our sex crimes hotline. And that could be a good thing, that there's no other victims coming forward. But again, I would reiterate what I said. Anyone with information, call. The current status of the case is what has been already reported. He is being held in California. At some point, he will be brought back to New York City. He has 2 separate cases that he will be coming back to New York City for. The homicide in the 105th precinct and the rape that occurred in the 72nd precinct. How long that process will take, that is not an easy question to answer because of the severity of what he's facing also in California. He has made statements to investigators in California that would make you believe he is responsible for other crimes, some of which occur in New York City. Nothing to this point has been able to be verified by us.
Yep.
So for the commissioner and the mayor, there was a case of an immigrant taxi driver from Queens who was arrested by ICE last month after he was picked up by police on a very low-level charge back in May. The fingerprinting from the arrest obviously put him on ICE's radar, and that's how they found him to arrest him. They plan to deport him next week. His name is Edison Barros. This has led advocates to kind of raise fresh concerns about the impact of fingerprints from arrests getting transmitted to the state database that ICE can then have access to and find people for deportation. I'm wondering what the two of you, what, if anything, the city can do to protect immigrants given the city's stated goals of being a sanctuary city, given kind of the framework that exists with fingerprinting and communication with the state.
Look, the first thing to say is we have to keep people in this city safe. And that's our sacred obligation. In fact, that's why we have been so clear with the federal government that we will not ask documentation status in our encounters with people in the city, whether it's police department, schools, public hospitals, you name it. The very same principle, though, that public safety underlies the vision applies here. If someone commits a crime, we have to address that crime for the safety of all. I think the crucial point here is there's a whole host of low-level offenses where someone is never fingerprinted. I mean, I'll even take it a step back before that. The vast majority of people don't commit any crime, including immigrants, including undocumented immigrants. So most people, this is a moot point because they never do anything that brings them into contact with law enforcement. The next category of people are people who do something very, very minor that would never lead to, under our approach, fingerprinting, and therefore there is no nexus. I do think the challenge is if someone has committed a crime that leads to fingerprinting, yes, there is that potential for the information flowing, but the first obligation we have is to protect the people of this city. I also think we're seeing ICE go after people in all sorts of ways that have nothing to do with flow of information from here. They're obviously doing every manner and sort of raid with no differentiation of whether someone has committed a crime or not. That's one of the biggest things that really needs to be focused on here. They're picking up people who have done nothing except are here undocumented. They're doing that on a regular basis. So I think that's several of the angles to look at here.
Maybe one or two more PD topics. Anybody else? Dean?
Can you just give us an update on the departmental trial of Officer Daniel Pantaleo? Over the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, there will be a departmental trial September. Now that's moved that back. CCRB is involved. Is that trial going to be here? Is it just Daniel Pantaleo? Can you just break it all down?
Yeah, Dean, Deputy Commissioner Kevin Richardson will speak about the process.
Good afternoon. So on July the 20th, disciplinary charges were served on Daniel Pantaleo. Those charges are from the Civilian Complaint Review Board. The Civilian Complaint Review Board has the case. They are prosecuting the case. They are evaluating their evidence. They're going over their witnesses. And when they're ready, they're going to bring the case in front of the Deputy Commissioner of Trials in this building where a trial would be held. I can't give you the time frame of that. That's completely in the CCRB's hands. As I said, they're evaluating their case as it stands right now.
I mean, can you talk to that? Because is this a case where now we could be another year from now if the CCRB is evaluating the evidence in the case again? Or
I don't, Dean, I don't see it going a year, but there is a process that needs to be followed, and it needs to be respected. So he was served with the charges, and as Commissioner Richardson just explained, what the process is and how long it takes. So there's really not much that we can do about that. We do have to follow the process.
And Dean, I get the full impression that everyone wants to move this process along. Obviously, again, respecting due process, being thorough, but no one wants to delay. Everyone wants to move. We've resolved the issue with the Justice Department. It's time to put this behind us.
Jonathan.
Or for Chief Shea, the Schneiderman case, a few weeks ago we asked, and no woman had stepped forward yet to file charges. Has anyone stepped forward to file a complaint with the police department for criminal investigation prosecution?
Yeah, nothing has changed in that case, Jonathan. Nobody has come forward.
Tony?
For Chief Shea, could you gave an extensive briefing on the triple homicide, suicide out in Astoria earlier in the week, but is there any clarity now on those final minutes or moments that led to that event in terms of the investigation? I believe there was a custody dispute that was interviewed.
What I'll say is that there are some facts that have come to light, not to change what we know. I won't get into great detail. Tragic incident. The heart goes out to the family for that young child, for the families of the victims first and foremost. In terms of motivation, I don't know that we will have a complete picture, but what we have is we have social media posts. We have interviews of many people now as we've gone forward from that incident of a disturbed person, and a couple themes come up. Money and finances have been raised. Issues with his business have come up, and I'm not going to tell you how I know this, but it has come up in the investigation. And the custody issue, all those three things have been raised by the individual that took the lives of the three innocent people in that life. And that's a combination of what I've said. It's a combination of open source social media. It's a combination of talking to witnesses and family members, and some things that I won't get into.
Let's go one more. Commissioner, in the back and forth with the DOJ over proceeding with the Pantaleo disciplinary process, the Department of Justice recently said, and this was on the record, that they informed Lawrence Byrne in the spring that the NYPD could go ahead and proceed with the case. Have you gotten to the bottom of that? Do you know whether he actually was informed and why there would have been
he was not informed of that. This is something that we've been following very closely, obviously, for years. He's had many discussions with DOJ, and that never at any point prior to a couple of weeks ago did they say it was okay to move forward.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Close that door. Let's see it close, and then we will get underway. I want to give you an opening statement before we go into other off-topic questions. All right, the door is about to close. Okay, so I have a bittersweet announcement to make. Some of you may have heard already. Our health commissioner, Dr. Mary Bassett, has accepted a teaching position at Harvard School of Public Health and will also lead their Center for Health and Human Rights as the director. I will speak for the whole administration and say New York City's loss is Harvard's gain. And I certainly understand why she was attracted to such a prestigious and important position. Her tenure here, I'm very happy to say, 4.5 years, everything I hoped it would be and more. I think she did extraordinary work. I want to mention a few things in particular. I think in the midst of some of the biggest challenges we've faced in recent years, she was an extraordinarily calm and clear and methodical voice addressing really complex issues, most notably the Ebola crisis, which I think for all of us was the ultimate in uncharted territory. And Mary Bassett at that moment really was particularly a powerful and important voice in the city, helping everyone to understand the disease and to recognize how we would work our way through that crisis, and we did. And I'm very, very proud of what New York City did at that time and in many other moments. She played a crucial role in the success of the Thrive NYC Mental Health Initiative, and that work will continue to deepen at Department of Health. She created something very important, the Center for Health Equity, and took existing efforts but really focused them on addressing disparities effectively. She also made the health department itself a fairer place to work. She did something I know near and dear to Ben Tucker's heart, and she instituted implicit bias training. And that has been a very high impact initiative at the Department of Health. So, you know, her whole career consistently about addressing disparity, addressing racial injustice. She'll have I think, extraordinary opportunity to continue that work by literally teaching the next generation of public health leaders in this country to follow her good example. So we are definitely going to miss her, but appreciate her deeply. And with that said, also want to let you know that the health department will be in very capable hands in the interim as we determine our pathway to new leadership. Dr. Auxiris Barbeau, who is the first deputy commissioner, will be the interim health commissioner. She has been at Dr. Bassett's side the whole time and knows her work well. Also served in a very important position previously for 4 years as the health commissioner of Baltimore and oversaw some really extraordinary reforms and improvements there. So people in New York City can rest assured that we are all in good hands with Dr. Barbeau leading the agency for the foreseeable future. With that, want to open up for questions about that or anything else. Yes?
So Mayor, a lot has been made about the speed camera program and Vision Zero through your tenure, and we ran the VIN numbers for 17,000 vehicles, for city vehicles. We found nearly 2,000 with open recalls, not fixed, Takata airbags, ignition switches. These are issues that have killed upwards of 50 people and has injured more than 200 people across the country. Just your comment on that and why DCAS doesn't get these cars fixed?
Well, first, I appreciate you doing that. That is a great example of the media alerting us to a problem we have to fix, so thank you. I don't know a lot about this issue, to be very honest with you. I do not an expert on DCAS's approach to recalls, but that needs to be vigorous as it would with anybody's vehicle. So we'll certainly look into that, and I want to make sure that anyone who drives a vehicle for the city is safe, and if there's something we have to tighten up, we will.
So these cars be on the road, 2 of them are FDNY ambulances with Takata airbags?
Again, I want to caution not knowing the specifics. I think the bottom line is, whether it's DCAS or any of our agencies, we have to make sure the vehicles are safe for everyone involved, and particularly want to protect our employees. And so we need to hold our agencies to a high standard, but I need to get some specifics from them before I can comment further. Yes?
Just quickly on Dr. Bassett stepping down, I wonder if if you know anything about whether revelation to the health department's failure to communicate those cases of elevated lead levels to NYCHA and then the subsequent DOI investigation into that's been reported, if that played any role at all?
No, absolutely not. Look, that matter's ongoing investigation, but really was about flow of information. And clearly all the agencies involved are doing everything they can to address the underlying issues. And Health Department has done extraordinary work. Lead poisoning in this city is down 90% since 2005, and that's a lot because of the work of the Health Department. But in terms of communication between agencies and reportings, there obviously was work that had to be addressed, and that has been addressed. No, she's made clear the outreach she received from Harvard goes back many months. And, you know, a tenured professorship at Harvard and the head of a major center, that's a pretty amazing offer.
I think the last time the commissioner post came open was the DOE commissioner position, and that was interesting that you had a person and that person went away. Have you
Interesting, yes. I agree with that statement. I think it was kind of operatic, actually, but go ahead.
Have you learned anything about trying to hire?
Don't let that happen. That's what. No, I said at the time, I've never seen something like that. I'm happily put it out of my mind. Thank you for bringing it back. No, in all of my days, I never saw anything like that. I think we can say that was a pretty singular episode. But no, look, I'm very, very proud that we have a whole lot of people in this administration who have gone the distance now, which is pretty unusual in public life. You know, a lot of people in these high-intensity public jobs do 2 years. We got a lot of people who are now in their 5th year. And we've had very, I think, real success finding strong successors. I mean, except at PD, everywhere else. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were here. We've found fantastic people, and I will say for the record, the commissioner's a good example. Richard Carranza is a good example. I know we'll find someone really good. I mean, public health, you know, the commissioner of health of New York City is one of the most prized health jobs in America. There'll be great people for it. Yes?
Mayor, how was jury duty?
It was actually, I'm a sucker for democracy, so it's a very moving experience. The last time that I served for a substantial period of time on a murder trial back in, I think it was '96, and I was deeply moved by that experience. I mean, I said to people, we were all talking while we were waiting to know what would happen in the jury room, and I said to people that it's actually one of the most powerful experiences in democracy you can have, to have everyday people of all walks of life, you know, brought together to make such an important decision. So, that's interesting. I talked to people there, and you know, everyone had that. We're all busy New Yorkers and hoping they would not be, you know, had their life disrupted for too long. But there was also a really strong undercurrent of people saying, "This is important." And, you know, if it were me who had a case that I was involved in, I'd want to know that, you know, good people were there trying to make sense of it. So I found it an inspiring experience in its own way.
You're heading to New Orleans this weekend, and, you know, you've discussed with us your new PAC and how you're going to sort of wade into some Democratic races outside of New York City.
Yeah.
But you've yet to make an endorsement in the gubernatorial race here in New York, or in any number of pretty hotly challenged primary races in the state Senate, some of these IDC.
Yeah.
Why should people trust your endorsement for out-of-town races if you haven't yet made an endorsement in the ones you know the best?
Well, as I've said to you, I am reserving my right to get involved in any number of races, and you know, some of that I expect to speak to pretty soon. You know, there's a lot that I have to do every day, and I have to consider anything I do in the state in light of that. But I fully intend to make my views known before this election cycle is over. That said, what's happening around the country is going to deeply affect New York City. And by the way, when I talk to everyday New Yorkers, they get this immediately. Whether there's a Democratic House of Representatives in Washington or a Democratic Senate in Washington or not, massive impact on New York City. The possibility of having Chuck Schumer as Majority Leader of the Senate alone, a huge, huge impact for this city and this state. So I think I've got to attend to both, and I intend to.
Mr. Mayor, the federal complaint that was submitted against NYCHA by the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office, it said that the Department of Health, there were a few lines about the Department of Health, and one of them said that from 2010 to 2015, DOH only inspected 60% of the apartments where a child registered elevated lead levels that meet its criteria for inspection, meaning under the DOH's own policies, they should have inspected 202 apartments, they only inspected 121. I'm wondering, since then, have you made any effort to get to the bottom of that?
We've already addressed the substantive issue, meaning I don't have the complaint in front of me, and with all due respect, I would need to see the literal wording to be able to speak to it. But the underlying question, we obviously have put out a policy now where in any instance, public housing or private housing, where there's evidence of a child having an elevated lead level, that Department of Health will be available to inspect. The vast majority of that's happening in private housing. And we intend to be just as vigorous there as in public housing. Obviously, meanwhile, a whole host of things are being done differently with both Department of Health and NYCHA, including getting to the original question with NYCHA and going and inspecting 130,000 units at their foundation using better technology to determine that there's lead there to begin with. So all of those approaches have now been updated, regardless of what happened going back to 2010.
I mean, the policy then was that they should have been inspecting these apartments and weren't. Don't you have any interest in finding out why they weren't following the
I have interest in fixing the problem once and for all, and I really don't want to retread. Obviously, if we find anything along the way that suggests something was missed, we're always going to look at it. But the bottom line here is, right now what matters in this city is inspecting every unit that needs to be inspected, getting care to any child that needs it, and addressing the underlying issues once and for all, and that's what the consent decree gets at for NYCHA.
A couple questions on the PAC and your trip this weekend.
Sure.
The first is, can you respond to your decision to hire the head of your PAC? Tate Hausman was convicted of voter fraud. It sounds like you were aware of that.
Yes.
And hired him. And then my second question is, have you raised any PAC money? And the third question is...
Okay, wait. Let's my brain can't go that fast. Tate, I've seen the coverage. I talked to him about it, but more importantly, I wanted to see the objective coverage of what happened then. And it's very clear and consistent. He was involved in a major voter registration and turnout effort in Ohio. He spent months there. He believed he was doing the right and appropriate thing to register and vote there because he was living there. He wasn't voting anyplace else. He thought he'd done it the right way. Turned out he didn't. He went back and accepted that he made a mistake and paid the appropriate fine and went on. But if you look at the history, it was clearly consistent with the work he was doing, trying to help people vote, and absolutely understandable. What's your second question?
The second question was, have you raised any PAC money since the...
I have been raising money. You know, you call people and you make a request, and it takes a while for money to come in, and you know that will all be proceeding now. And then we're going to be following the reporting structures of the Federal Elections Commission and the State Board of Elections, and then doing some additional disclosure beyond that.
The final question was, with New Orleans, our understanding is that some of the trip will be paid for by taxpayers, by the city, and some from the PAC. What's sort of the rough breakdown, and what qualifies this for some taxpayer funding?
So look, again, I'll give a layman's answer. The lawyers can give a more exact answer, but I think the central point is when you're working on substantive issues, not partisan politics, it is governmental. When you're working on partisan politics, it's political. Most of this trip is clearly governmental. I'm going to be meeting with fellow mayors and elected officials and talking about common efforts to address issues in our cities and to achieve changes that we all need. I also think that speaking to people about a bigger agenda for progressive change is crucial to achieving what we need here in New York City. We've got to push the spectrum on some of these issues to get the kind of changes we need in Washington. So that all will be determined by lawyers and obviously with a check-in with the Conflict of Interest Board. But I think the simple way to define it is the partisan politics is the part that needs to be addressed with the PAC. Anyone? Yes?
Ask the question, but so if you will be doing some partisan stuff there, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Do you plan to meet with other candidates or people who are running for office there? I mean, what's your political involvement?
Yeah, so I can't in this case speak to the trip because some of the details are still being worked through. I think a more typical example, just to give you something to make sense of it all, is, for example, if I go somewhere, often have gone to U.S. Conference of Mayors meetings, for example, and while at one of those meetings then campaign for someone in a partisan fashion, you know, that amount of the trip has to be split off. And it's not a new thing. There's a formula for how to do that.
So will you be campaigning for anyone there?
Again, the trip has, even though it's real soon, the final details have not been resolved. Okay, any other topics on people's minds? Yes?
I just want to get your thoughts on the Rain Corporation study that was put out yesterday about the proposal for single-payer healthcare in New York. It found that implementing the system under the Dick Gottfried's bill would actually decrease overall healthcare spending across the state, kind of shift the cost burden through taxation to the wealthiest New Yorkers. Wondering what you think of that, given that there's kind of a picture now of the practical implications and your favorability toward taxing the rich.
Yes, thank you for noting that. I believe, and I believed when I first ran, that the wealthy were not paying their fair share in taxes, and it's only gotten worse because of the recent legislation passed by the Congress. I have not seen the RAND study, but I do support Assemblyman Gottfried's bill, and I think it's the right direction. So it, in a good way, does not surprise me that objective study of it showed that it could reduce costs and create a more equitable burden in terms of who pays for health care. But I'd have to see it to give you a more exact answer. Okay, last call. Anything else on people's minds? Going once, twice. Thank you, everyone.